Freedom and democracy in Europe. Ladies and gentlemen, when we arranged on this topic, when we agreed on this topic, we were not yet sure, actually we were not even aware how dramatically this topic would then be of relevance. Let me please invite a personality who has always been fighting for freedom, democracy, democratic rights. And there's a number of questions related to this. Let me express a warm welcome to Excellency Carlos Puigdemont, the 130th President of Catalonia, leader of the independence movement, and member of the European Parliament. Great to have you. As we have been losing some time, I keep my intro quite short. I think the CV is available on the internet, and you have been reading that in our invitation. But perhaps just to mention that the President Puigdemont came all the way from Brussels to talk to us, to talk to you. So please then take the opportunity to ask questions after a little keynote. And not just to mention Brussels, but President Puigdemont has also quite a substantial political career, including the position of being mayor of, do you say Girona? Do you express it that way? Okay. Oh, what a relief. And let me also please express a warm welcome to Professor Josep Luis Aray y Rodriguez. He is professor at the University of Barcelona and Chief of Staff of Carlos Puigdemont, and Excellency Christina Schreiber. She is the head of the delegation of the Government of Catalonia to Central Europe, located in Vienna. And a personality I'm happy to welcome is also the director of the Congress Center, who oversees the event and who took his time to be with us. But now, before I invite the President, let me express a very warm welcome to all of you. Students of the MCI, I mean, the sun's out there, and it's Friday afternoon, and you have been taking the time to be with us. We really appreciate it that you want to discuss this topic. Take home whatever you think is of importance, what you can learn, but also please engage in the discussion. And obviously, not just our students, but also our faculty, our alumni, our partners, our sponsors, and all those who are interested in the MCI and what we've been doing so far. Now, this event will also be available, or is available on live stream, so we'll receive also questions later on for the Q&A session. Coming to my screen, on my screen via email, but please, you in the room, you have the opportunity, you have the advantage to just raise your hand and engage in the discussion. Now, I am happy to now invite you, Distinguished Excellency, to change positions with me. I'll have a seat and I'll invite you to give your keynote. And afterwards, please raise your questions.
So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, Rector Mr. Amer, professors, students. It's a pleasure, and thank you for your kind invitation to take part in this conference at the Management Center here in Innsbruck, a prestigious center of university excellence. For me, it is an honor to form part of the selected group of distinguished guest lecturers and have the opportunity to share with you my perspective on Europe, on freedom and democracy with all of you here today. What is freedom? All of you, for sure, have a different approach, a different idea of freedom from the person sitting next to you. For me, freedom is an inspiration and also an aspiration. The idea of freedom inspired my personal and political career and underpinned my decisions as President of Catalonia. Freedom is an intrinsic part of democracy. One cannot exist without the other. The birth of European Union and its subsequent development strove to strengthen the emotional and social bonds between Europeans, and it achieved this goal. The freedoms granted by the European Economic Community were a beacon for states that were not members. That union, founded to help cure the wounds and resentments of the two world wars, with the creation of economic bonds and mutual trust, went on to become a shared political project that has progressed step by step to become the European Union as we know it today. Democracy and the consolidation of the rule of law has to a large extent fulfilled the dreams of the founding fathers of the European Union. However, history has taught us that everything can change much faster than we think. As Mr. Amer said when he asked me to speak at this conference, Europe was a different place. Within 2 months, Russia's invasion of Ukraine has shaken European stability and the global balance. It has called into question the liberal international order established after the end of the Cold War with the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989. It is heartening that the European Union has reacted resolutely, but I'm concerned whether or not we will be able to maintain and stimulate European unity of action, especially in terms of defense policies and diplomacy, which have to be harmoniously balanced. Russia has resurfaced a clear challenge to the established order. China is competing with the United States to become a top superpower. China's influence in Asia and Africa is increasing all the time. In this regard, the European Union must leave behind the paternalism inherited from the age of colonialism and work to build alliance around the world. Europe cannot close on itself, nor forego the important role that it has to play in international policy. I want a Europe that is internationally involved, striving to promote democracy, freedom, and human rights. In this respect, the European Union's limited international influence without a common defense policy or adequately development diplomacy can now be seen as a great weakness of the European project. Authoritarianism has gained ground, and we have to combat with more democracy, more freedom, more human rights, even within the European Union itself. Just look at Poland, Hungary, and Spain. We also have to defend fundamental rights and the welfare state, which have benefited our society so greatly. To achieve this, we have to recover our strength. There is a sensation that the European Union has grown weaker in recent years. The economic crisis that started in 2008 really damaged the image of European institutions among citizens. The austerity measures applied by Brussels hit people hard. Fortunately, with great efforts and sacrifices, we were able to weather the storm. Then came Brexit. The departure of the United Kingdom and the negotiations to approve the withdrawal treaty were thought and costly. Brexit caused an emotional rift that I think will still take years to heal. One of the fundamental pillars of European Union, the United Kingdom, abandoned the European project. This should give us all pause for some serious internal reflection. We also face other collective challenges as a result, such as the issue of the Irish border and Scotland's desire to hold a second referendum on independence and rejoin the European Union in the event that it becomes an independent state. The European Union also has other problems to deal with. There is excessive bureaucratization in Brussels, and institutions often operate in a way that is far removed from the citizens themselves. While many of you may think that this is simply a matter of perception, I have been able to see it for myself as a member of the European Parliament. And to remedy this, I strongly advocate strengthening digital democracy, streamlining bureaucratic and administrative process, and promoting civic participation in policy and decision-making. We must ensure that people feel part of the European Union rather than just forming part of it. Generating a sense of shared European identity is, from my point of view, essential for the future of the project. I strive for a European Union that progresses towards federalism as a formula for more effective governance, subject to a European rule of law that is respectful of all the nations that form the European family. I honestly believe that a more federal Europe will help to resolve the European identity crisis and enable us to get back on the path towards cohesion and integration. Moreover, it will be an exportable model. Unity within diversity, with a clear distribution of competences, bottom-up, fair financing that embrace solidarity and respect for the sovereignty of the European nations. I will now like to talk to you about the issue of sovereignty, which is not a small matter of discussion. In fact, it is crucial that we approach the issue from a democratic perspective in order to strengthen the European Union project. At the start of my speech, I'll tell you that for me, freedom was an inspiration and an aspiration. I'm sure all you will agree with that. In a democratic Europe, the civil and political rights of the people must be granted. The right to self-determination is one of these fundamental rights, recognized and accepted by the states of the European Union. In recent years, my country, Catalonia, has attempted to exercise self-determination to become a new European state if the majority of Catalans so decide. Why then is this right not respected and enforced within the European Union? I have always advocated that the right to self-determination has to be upheld in the European Union, just like the other political and civil rights that we all defend. As a national minority, Catalonia wants to exercise self-determination peacefully and democratically, without coercion from Spain or the police violence that we experienced on the day of the referendum held on the 1st of October 2017. In this respect, the European Union has to be able to guarantee internally that the rights of national minorities are respected, just as Italy has to strive to protect the rights of South Tyrol and Romania must ensure the rights of its Hungarian minorities. Likewise, the Catalan people have to be able to exercise self-determination if that is the sustained demand of a social and political majority, as is the case in Catalonia. Let's look at the example of Scotland, which was able to vote freely on its political future. The United Kingdom recognized Scotland's sovereignty in 2014, and that is precisely what 80% of Catalans, I repeat, 80% of Catalans have demanded for the past decade. Catalonia sees itself as a sovereign political entity with the right to decide its own political future. There have been large peaceful demonstrations seen around the world, with hundreds of thousands of people taking to the streets of Barcelona or the rest of the country. Moreover, the social majority has been proved at the ballot box, and not only on the day of the referendum. In the last elections of the Parliament of Catalonia 1 year ago, pro-independence parties also won a 52% majority of the votes cast. So we want full recognition of the right to create our own state. The democratic demand of the Catalans must be heard. Spain wants to stop it using force, the courts and prisons, rejecting all channels of dialogue and negotiation. Spain incarcerated 9 pro-independence political prisoners for almost 4 years, and 6 other political leaders have been in exile for 4.5 years. This situation is not normal, is not acceptable in the European Union. This has been demonstrated by the international backlash against the Spanish government and the European Court rulings that, to date, have all ruled in favor of our legal defense against Spain's judicial persecution. Still today, thousands of people face this persecution in Catalonia for their pro-independence beliefs. Last week, the American magazine New Yorker made public a 2-year investigation by the Canadian Citizen Lab at Toronto University, which has been called the Catalan Gate. According to this report, more than 60 Catalan political leaders, activists, lawyers, journalists, and relatives have been spied with Pegasus, the Pegasus spyware, for the last 5 years at least. It is well known that only states can buy this software from the NSO company, and that the cost of such illegal undercover operation will amount to a quantity of millions of euros. Spain has violated our individual and collective rights our privacy and the secrecy of our communications. Catalan Gate has been labeled as the biggest espionage scandal against political dissent ever revealed. As probably most of you know, I have been living in exile for 4.5 years. This is not a pleasant or easy situation. I had to flee from my country for having organized a referendum. In exile, I have been able to defend myself before impartial, independent courts in Belgium, in Germany, and in Italy. And we are now waiting for the ruling of the European Court of Justice. Time has proven that our legal strategy has worked because all the European courts have ruled in our favor in the cases against Spain. We are free, relatively free, and working as members of the European Parliament despite the wishes to the contrary of the Spanish courts, which specialize in politics, not justice. So without Europe, there will be no space of freedom where we can defend ourselves from the judicial persecution that we suffer in Spain. Let me end saying that without a strong, united Europe that upholds fundamental rights and promotes the participation of the European people in the community's institutions, we cannot generate this feeling of belonging nor play an important role in the international order. Unless we want to be left behind, we have to progress decisively towards strengthening European democracy and tackling all the collective challenges that we face within the European Union, including recognizing Catalonia's right to self-determination with mechanisms such as internal enlargement, for example. By working together cohesively and being consistent internally, we can respond externally and remain open to the 5 continents. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, President Puigdemont. I will have noted some questions from my side, but if you already have questions, please feel free to raise your hands or feel encouraged to raise your hands. There will be microphones in the room, and then please, when I give you the word or you have the microphone with you, please briefly introduce yourself, who you are, and then come with a question. My first question, I see 2 of them, if I'm not mistaken. My first question is, now, Excellency, Catalonia is an autonomous region. What would be, from your perspective, the benefit or the difference between being an autonomous region and an independent region? What would it make better?
Well, Catalonia is an autonomous region on the paper, but actually, in practice, that is not the same. The Catalan self-government is controlled by the Spanish Constitutional Court, which is formed by former politicians come from the 2 main political parties. So in reality, our real power is less than ever. I will give you an example to understand what is the problem. In Catalonia exists a huge consensus among our society. It doesn't matter if you are in favor or against independence, to ban bullfighting. And our parliament approved several years ago a law considering bullfighting something unacceptable in Catalonia, so to ban corridas. Well, finally, the Spanish Court of Justice, despite this consensus, decided to suspend this law. So technically now you can organize a bullfighting in Catalonia. That is an example. So, in question regarding our fiscal relationship with Spain, the question of the language, the question of identity, the question of the respect of our self-government, there is a big difference. If you are an autonomous region than if you are an independent republic. For example, as a European Parliament, member of the European Parliament, I cannot use my language, which is spoken in 4 European countries: Catalonia, Andorra, France, Italy. And it's official in an area inhabited by 10 million people. But I have not the right to use my mother tongue to speak, to address. Tomorrow I will attend the COFOE, the Conference of the Future of Europe in Strasbourg. I cannot use my language. So why? Because we are not independent.
Thank you so much. I have a number of questions, but as I have promised to encourage you and then to take your questions, I see 2 of them now in the 4th row, if I'm right. One is, I think, our Jean Monnet professor, but better you introduce yourself.
Thank you, Markus Frischow, Jean Monnet professor here at MCI. Thank you for your interesting speech. You had mentioned the Scottish referendum and also Brexit. Now, in this context, it was always clear that if the Scots would leave the UK, that they could not re-enter the European Union because of Article 49, where all the remaining or all member states have to agree. And it was clear that Spain would veto that for precisely your reason. So even more so, I guess, in case if you would become independent from Spain, I think politically speaking and also legally, you could not re-enter the European Union. So what's your idea on that situation?
Well, let me say it is quite strange for a political project such as is the European Union to refuse a member like Scotland and to make all the efforts that we must do, because I agree with that idea, to incorporate, for example, Kosovo. It's out of sense to say no to Scotland and to say yes to other regions. And secondly, there is a main difference between the case of Catalonia and the case of Scotland. Scotland is not part of the European Union. Catalonia, yes. So in our case, we think applies the same rule that allows the East Germany to join the European Union without a unanimous decision of the member states. Because that was an internal enlargement. The lands come from the East Germany, becomes part of the European Union thanks to an internal enlargement. So I insist in that, for me, key point. Is the project of European Union could resist or has sense to refuse a member like Catalonia, which is a positive contributor to the European budget since 20 years ago, which is with a powerful economy, with one of the most important cities in the south of Europe in terms of startups of technology like is Barcelona, to refuse that reality because, well, we must to apply and to prove we are ready to join European Union rules. What kind of rules we are applying now? We're using euro currency. We are applying all the European treaties. We transpose all the treaties into our legislation, so we are free and normal European citizens. I understand there was some need to make a technical process, but that cannot take a lot of time. So we are a member of the European Union, and in case of independence, if the majority of the Catalan people want, which is exactly the will of the Catalan people, we must remain part of the European Union. If not, I cannot understand the project of the European Union.
I think there's another question in the same row. Please.
Hello? Yes, perfect. Nicolas Söleman, my name, engineering student at MCI. Thank you for the excellent keynote speech. I was curious, you mentioned the words, well, digitalization and active participation of citizens more intrinsically into the European values, right, and European Union. And also regarding the, say, the referendum from the Brexit, where digital platforms had a huge influence due to their polarization effect on society and also on the outcome of these referendums. How do you see this play out also on future referendums for, say, Catalonia or different small countries?
You are right. There is some influence, not all positively, using new tools, new digital tools that can affect democracy. That is a challenge for Europe. You are right. We must be very careful. But in the other side, the potential of that tools is enormous. And that allows people who has the skills, the knowledge, that speaks several languages, to be part of that decision-making process. So for me, the future of Europe, one of the bases of the future of Europe is to build bottom-up decisions to allow people to intervene and to do it in an easy way. And the easy way means new smartphones, for example, digital tools. But we need to teach people. We need to teach the young people to use it, to prepare administrations, to open administration to this use, thinking on the risks and the dangers. But that tools, digitalization is here and will increase, will grow. So it has no sense to try to stop it. That is a reality. We must deal with it. We must prepare people and our administration. And finally, from my point of view, all of you must be asked in a regular times about all the questions. It's easy. You can invest billions of euros through your smartphone. Why you cannot decide things that concerns you from your village or your region? That is no sense. Well, and that allows another, for me, important aspect, the effects on the management of democracy, on the power of these kind of tools. As you probably know, all the industrial revolutions has caused an effect on ideologies and the way we manage democracy or power. And obviously, that new industrial revolution will provoke effects on the ideologies and the way we manage administrations or the way that we rule democracy. We must think on it and to prevent the risk to the populism, to the extremes, to colonize this debate, this conversation. We need from the liberal democracy to have a conversation about that, to discuss and to propose and to lead some standard in order to leading the use of new technologies on the manage of our democracies.
Now, there is a very, very touching piece also which was filmed now recently regarding the history of Südtirol, of South Tyrol, of Alte Adige. And it had to do with the Option, which was, to keep it short, which was a forced referendum. Now you have to perhaps leave or stay. I know that there is a little, there's only certain perhaps analogies, but there was a totally different context. But what many of us learned, that if you go into a referendum, in that case there was a different, obviously, background, but there was splits, and there was, emotional splits within families, within friends, within companies, within villages, within whatever, yeah. And don't you see, due to this, first of all, I think everyone growing up in a democracy is basically pro self-determination and independence, all positive words. But don't you see the danger of such a split and how to overcome such emotional distances which may be created?
You are right. The most important things, issues, challenge has this effect. Provoke some divisions, contradictions, confrontation. But that is not a tragedy. That is normal in a democratic society because all of us think differently. So the problem is not we share opinions or not, or this room is divided in two halves, one half is in favor, another is against. That is normal. That is not a tragedy because if we discuss about division, well, all create division. Look at the latest, the elections in France. There was a division. Or what about the debate on corona measures? Or in the elections in the United States? So the tragedy is not to have divisions. That is a sign of mature democracy. The problem is the lack of the tools to manage that differences. That is the point when the confrontation becomes a conflict. So for these situations, democracy has invented a tool called referendum. And the golden rule of that tool is to accept the decision of the majority. And we, as the pro-independents, or myself as an independentist, I will accept the decision of Catalan people if they decide to remain in Spain, because that is a democratic decision. So we demand the opposite too, and please do not concede that argument to say we cannot discuss on this because you can provoke a division in the families. Well, I don't believe in a silent society with no discussions, with no confrontation of legitimate ideas. Other things is discussing about ideas that are not legitimate. For example, the death penalty. That is, or to create, well, xenophobia. But what is the problem to us Catalan people, Catalan citizens, about their own future? And the lack of tools, the lack of the right to solve that division, if we can call this, that is the problem. The problem begins when a part of that conversation is put out. You cannot discuss on it, because if you discuss or you try to do it, you will end in jail or in exile. That's the problem.
I look into the audience. Is there questions? Please, I see right in the middle, a hand up in the air.
Good afternoon. My name is Magdalena Wutsch. I'm at the moment a student of the MCI Business and Management Study Program. I have a maybe different question. I think there is a tendency at the moment for young people that they think that politicians are corrupt. They don't take them too serious. They just think they do it for money, for their parties, whatever. They don't trust them. Why do you think is that, and how could you change it that young people are really taking politics seriously and maybe also want to be part of it? Because I don't think that many young people are interested at the moment because we are so far away from it.
Well, you are right, explaining the disappointing of a whole generation about politics, because some behavior or some attitudes from the political sector are very, very disappointed. But precisely, our example gives what is exactly the challenge. We are or in exile or in front of justice because we decide to apply our engagement to our voters. We ran for elections, proposing to the people to become independent, which was a risk, and we apply until the end this our compromise. What is the consequences? Was some of my colleagues spent more than 3 years and a half in jail, and I living in exile for more than 4 years and a half. That is a bad example, and that obviously is a bad example for the young people to do politics or to have respect, to pay respect for politicians. But democracy must be fight every day. If you don't do politics, someone will do in your name. So if you abandon the game, other will play it in your name. So politics is not perfect, but if we fight every day in our lives and in our common life for fundamental values, we force political institutions to respect them. That, for me, is the problem. It's not the behavior of the political class, because always, in the university, in the companies, in the sports, in the church, always, because we are not perfect, there are problems. But if there is a system that allows people to follow, to have tools to exige accountability, to exige balance to the people, probably, I'm sure, the behavior will change. And when I mention the importance of the role of new tools, I mean this. Because now, the majority of you are called to vote every 4 years, only. That is the only moment when the majority of the Europeans can decide. Well, that is an enormous mistake. Why are powers afraid to ask people? Why? Because people now, it's not the case if you look at the 5 decades ago or 1 century ago, when the illiteracy was the majority of the people was illiterate. Now people are skills, knowledge, access to the information, so are absolutely ready to take part on the decision process. So for me, that is important to fight for open democracy to the new tools is one of the ways to prevent that risk. Because if we disconnect from the basis, from the people, that could end with a serious problem for European democracy. I'm very disappointed for how European Union is working. As European, I was very, very disappointed by the silence of European Union when Catalan people was beaten only for express their opinion. But I have no tools. Only can use my speaking time in the European Parliament to say something, but that's all. Why? What about if all of you has the power every month or every 3 months to approve or disapprove the policies? That is very different. So we need to fight until we achieve to change in the better way, in the best way, our democracy.
I think there is a microphone already in the first row. Mm-hmm.
Hello, my name is Hermann Kolb. I'm also a student from the MCI. I would like to know your opinion about the re-election of Mr. Orban and his slow rise to being a dictator within the European Union.
Could you repeat that?
Please keep the microphone close to
about the re-election of Mr. Orban and his slow rise to being a dictator within the European Union.
He was questioning, what do you think about Viktor Orban, his re-election and his tendency to move away from democracy, if that's a good...
Yeah, I am
okay.
Sorry. I am very critic about the Viktor Orban's regime, because in Hungary, there is a threat for the whole European democracy. And for me, the respect of minorities, that concerns sexual minorities, religious, political, it doesn't matter, is essential to strengthen our democracies. So this narrative that considers migrants or minorities a kind of risk for our lives, I don't share, and is out of the European way of life. For this, I support all the decisions adopted from the European institutions to open that process in order to, to press Viktor Orban's government to respect the rule of law, the European rule of law. Because if not, that could create a bad precedent that could threaten the whole European Union. And doesn't matter if we are discussing on Hungary, but it's the same for Spain. The only thing we can agree with some opinion come from the East countries of Europe is that is against that double standard in Europe. Why we are so brave against Orban or against Polish regime, but what we are so silent when we discover that Spain is spying massively political dissidents. That is also the problem.
Now I have a number of questions or comments also coming via the live stream. So please apologize if I once in a while look at my screen. And one comes from Maria Jose Tintore. And it is, I come from a big family, most of them no independentists. I have no problem with it. Some of them do not want to talk about independence. Others do not agree with me, but we can argue peacefully. In the worst situation, we used to joke. Sense of humor and love makes the rest. So that was a comment. And now there comes a question. And the question is a bit, let's say, more critical, where it goes into, it's a question now. The Spanish economic plundering, and the question is being brought in by Ms. Palma Goldberg. And the question is, the Spanish economic plundering of the Catalans is increasing every year, and so is the harassment of Catalan culture and language. Why don't people take this and go to the streets to protest?
She's asking about the fiscal situation between Catalonia and Spain. Well, we come from 2 years of pandemics. That has created a demobilization of whole European society. It's quite difficult to call the people to organize big demonstrations, as we done in the past since 2010. But I'm very confident that will arrive a moment when, again, the thousand of Catalans will take the streets to protest. Not to protest for one thing, which there is a lot of things that we can use to protest, but to protest for the lack of commitment from the Spanish government to find a political solution, a political agreement in order to solve our conflict. Yes, our economy is beaten because the unequal relationship with the Spanish state. We lose every year the equivalent of 8% of our GDP. That means 20 billions per year. So we cannot resist our economy, our society, our policy. We cannot organize our life in the way what we want if we have not in our hands the resources, political or economical resources to organize it. So it's not only question of protest, it's question also of hope. Protest, we have a lot of reasons to protest, but there is one big reason to have hope. We want to survive, we want to live as a nation. And fortunately or not, there is one way that ensures our survival as a nation, which is independence. We try to do all things inside the Spanish system to improve our self-government, to solve that kind of troubles, that kind of problems, but that was a failure because we never were respected in our will and how we want to be members of the Spanish state. So there is a lot of reasons to protest, but it is the main reason to have hope. And I suggest the next time we talk the streets, it's not only for protest, it's for fighting, for advancing to do more steps forward in that process of independence.
Now I have another question here in the internet, and then I'll see questions again in the room. And the one is coming from Norbert Veit. He says he comes from Germany, and I mean the question was brought in via email. What is the applicable legal basis that is within the framework of the current Spanish constitution, which was also granted to Catalonia by a majority in the 1978 referendum to justify secession from Spain?
Well, I don't understand the meaning of the question. It's about the constitutional system of Spain?
Now, when it came to the Spanish, when it came to the autonomy which was given to Catalonia within the Spanish constitution and some constitutional rights. What is different now, or what can be taken from this process, or and from this? Now, what is different now? Why is it not? Why is it not possible now, which was possible in 1978?
Understood.
No?
That is a big difference, because at that time, when the Spanish Constitution was approved, that was some years after Franco's death, and the fathers of the Constitution decided to approve a text, in my point of view, in a smart way, very open, to allow the next generations to decline how the future generations will consider the limits of the Constitution. But in that frame, the majority of Catalan people thought there was not a bad possibility to be recognized as a kind of nation within Spain. That was the beginning. And I must to say that was quite real, that possibility. But two things stopped. One was the very beginning in 1981, when the coup d'etat, the military coup d'etat against the Spanish democracy, has put the first devolution process to the autonomous region. That has stopped. But the second moment when that was definitively stopped was in 2010, after the rule of the Spanish Constitutional Court, which limits the effects of the Constitution. So when Catalan people approves the improvement of our autonomous law, the Statute of Autonomy, 2005, and that was approved by the Spanish Parliament 2006, and approved by referendum in 2006 with a huge majority. Despite all of this, the Spanish Constitutional Court decided in 2010 to ban the main articles of that law. And that put an end in that constitutional pact agreement, and that has changed everything. Because after this rule, you cannot develop more, you cannot see a big evolution in our self-government because it's limited by the Spanish Constitutional Court. So in fact, the Spanish court changed the constitution, and that is the big and the key problem.
All right, thank you very much for this insight. Now, I saw two questions here in the room. One is in the third row and one is more or less in the middle.
Yes, my name is Victoria Burka. I used to work at the European Parliament in Brussels. Now I recently started working for the MCI. So I would have a question regarding the European Parliament, because you are now an MEP yourself since 2.5 years. We are half legislature. So I would be interested how you see your chances to change the situation or to bring fresh ideas from your side, from within.
Please, a bit slower. We have quite a difficult acoustics here on stage. So if you could put keep your microphone close to your mouth and speak perhaps a little slower.
Yeah. Well, basically, I'm interested in your insight from the European Parliament and how you see your role as an MEP and the chances to change things from within this only directly elected institution.
Thank you very much. Well, I'm a member of the non-attached members, so my possibility to do things are limited. I'm not part of any family group. So as you know, there is some rights I have, not some initiative. But despite the European Parliament is not a real parliament in the sense of we can control everything, we can do laws, we can, like in the other democracies we can influence and discuss and put some issues that is quite difficult to send to the European institutions. For example, the question of self-determination. The two main parties are not interested on discuss on it. The officiality of the Catalan language, nor Popular Party nor Socialist Party want to discuss. But thanks to our speaking time, our role in the committees, we can influence or to attract the attention. There is a problem. That is not enough. That is not enough. And I prefer, as MEP, to be more controlled by my voters. My voters know me, obviously, because we were involved in a big case, a big no case, Catalan process for independence. But the majority of the people doesn't know who is his MEP. So I prefer to be more controlled, more asked, more forced by my voters to do things, to do something, to explain, to present the result of my work. And with this, probably my role as MEP will grow, will be more strength. Because when I address to a commissar, or a vice president, or the president of the commission, well, they only look at a non-attached member. So they decide to not receive me, for example. Today we present in front of the European Ombudsman a complaint against Didier Reinders because he received a far-right party in Spain and he refused to receive us, despite we won the elections by more than 1 million votes in Catalonia. So probably if he was more controlled and also I was more controlled, probably no one can refuse to attend a MEP that represents the whole European society. It's difficult to change things because there is in fact, is the power of two main parties. And there is no respect for minorities. It doesn't matter if it's in the left or in the right. There is no respect for minorities. If you are not member of the big families, you are not respected. For me, changing these things, and I think we have some possibility to change, the discussion on the COFOE, if you look at a lot of questions come from the citizens panel, are in this way. We want to participate. We want to be part of the decision process. That, for me, is the next step that European must do. And well, I'm a little MEP, one of the 700 MEPs, but I think we can do noise or push for that the things moving on.
May I briefly come in here before we'll invite you to ask the next question? Now, in case, just as a potential development, in case you were not re-elected into the European Parliament, would that change your ability to freely move in Europe? I mean, given the status of immunity, what would it change for your personal life?
Well, I am currently under the 3rd European arrest warrant and the 3rd international arrest warrant against me, but is suspended until the European Court of Justice decide on the prejudice questions presented by the Spanish judge on the question if the Belgian courts are right or not to reject the extradition of my colleague, Luis Puig, to Spain, which is our case. So I'm free to travel across Europe except one country called Spain, which is out of this kind of rule of law. But if finally I lose my seat or I decide to resign, obviously I will lose my immunity to travel to Strasbourg, and I must to confront in front of the Belgian court that demanding for my extradition, that European arrest warrant. In the past, the decision of the Belgian court was to reject, in the case of my colleague, based on 2 main points. First, because the judge that is asking for our detention is not the natural judge, is not the judicial authority, and that represents a violation of a fundamental right. And the second one, for me most important, because there is clear evidences that if Mr. Puig was sent to Spain, there was a not fair trial, because the presumption of innocence is violated by politicians, by members of the judiciary that are referring to us as guilties without having been in front of the court. So probably the decision will be the same. The question is, after that, it could be a 4 European arrest warrant or a 5. We say no. We must to put an end to that kind of persecution. Once one European court has rejected a demand for extradition based on the case, not because formal things, I think no other jurisdiction can accept a 4th or 5th European arrest warrant against me. But we'll see. We don't know.
Thanks again. Now, I think you have been waiting for quite a long time. Sorry for that.
It's okay. Thank you. My name is Christoph Schmidt. I'm 21 years old. I'm also a student of the MCI, Management, Communication and IT. And my question for you is, do you still consider yourself as a president of Catalonia? And if you do, what do you think do you achieved for the state of Catalonia or country?
Well, obviously, the president of Catalonia was elected by Catalan Parliament and is Pere Aragonès. But I'm the president in exile, because when I was removed, that was, for me, an illegal decision that I denounced in front of the Human Rights Committee of the United Nations. If that committee decide that that decision was illegitimate, in fact, that means I was a legitimate president of Catalonia. Well, what I prefer to refer my situation as a president in exile, because that is the reality. And that allows me to continue fighting for our goal to achieve our path to be recognized as an independent state. If I was remaining, stay in Spain, if I cross the border, I will be arrested immediately and put in a jail for not less than 13 years. So the possibility to fight from the Spanish jail is very limited. So it's not interesting if we want to continue fighting to be arrested. And I will fight until the end to prevent this scenario. There is a chance in the middle, if the rule of the European Court of Justice, in the case that concerns our immunity, is in our favor. The question is, will Spain respect it? Will Spain respect the rule, or the European rule? Or, like in the case in Poland, will reject to apply the decision of the European Court of Justice? If Spain accepts, which is my hope, because for me, I want a more democratic and a more pro-European Spain, because that benefits all Europe. If Spain decides to respect, that allows me to return freely in Catalonia. And that could help the process, but I don't know, because my life, during the last 4.5 years, changed every week. I was arrested last year in Sardinia. I never expected to be arrested. I don't know if the next week I will be arrested in Strasbourg or in Belgium, I don't know. So I cannot do plans in my life for a long future.
Thanks again. I see a question over there. A young gentleman quite in the middle. Please raise your hand again so that we can see you, and there's one more then up front. And questions keep popping in now via email. I hope we can at least take some of them.
Hello, my name is Marco Manfrini. I'm from Bozen, South Tyrol. I wanted to ask you, if you look back on the independence process and particularly 2017, was it worth it for you personally and politically, first? Second, if you would do it the same, exactly the same, and thirdly, probably the most interesting part, if you would have gone further and not suspended the declaration, do you think some countries would have recognized Catalonia?
Thank you very much for your interesting question. Yes, obviously I do mistakes normally, because I'm a human being. I'm not perfect, so during that time I committed mistakes too. One of the the big one was when I decided to suspend the Declaration of Independence on the 10th of October in order to allow the possibility to dialogue with the Spanish government. Some days before the 10th of October, after the referendum, I received direct messages from the Spanish government saying, okay, that situation demands a dialogue. We understand what's going on in the 1st of October referendum. We must discuss, let's talk, etc., etc., etc. At that moment, as a president committed to a non-violent way and a democratic way to solve political troubles, I decide to privilege the way to dialogue. That's my duty as a president. Despite I am pro-independence, above all, I'm the president of the whole country. So the majority of the Catalans, even among the Catalans who are against independence, the majority of the will is to talk and to solve democratically our issue. So I accepted the challenge, so I decided to suspend the declaration in order to open that window, in this opportunity, to dialogue. And that was a mistake, because that was a lie. Because obviously, after that, after this, that moment was broken, Spain has prepared a huge repression. That was a mistake. Obviously, that teaches us for the next occasions. Never trust in the Spanish word, in the Spanish commitments, because they lie. They lie. We decide, and I personally decide, to not send any message to recognize our Declaration of Independence. But if we, in the 10th of October, remains in power and controlling the streets, I'm absolutely confident that several countries will start to say, well, probably that must be attended, and why not recognizing Catalonia as independent state? Yeah, but it's a speculation now.
Now, I tried to bring in some questions from the internet, and one is from John McAuley, and he asks, after the revelation of Catalan Gate, how has the Spanish government reacted? Do you expect Spain to clear up the espionage case?
Not at all, because several parties presented in the Spanish Parliament a proposal to create a committee, like in the European Parliament we done, a committee in order to investigate the scandal of massive espionage. And the majority, refused it. So we are not confident that Spain will clarify, because still we don't know who was the responsible of the creation of the terrorist group called GAL that killed more than 20 people and kidnapped several people too. And we don't know who was the Mr. X, who obviously was part of the Spanish government at that time. So I'm not very confident that we can discover who ordered to spy my wife, or to spy my friends, or my lawyers when we are discussing our strategy when I was arrested in Germany, for example. But there is a chance, because we will present several lawsuits in 5 European jurisdictions, not only in Spain. We will present a lawsuit in Belgium, in France, in Germany, in Switzerland, and also in Luxembourg. So we'll see if finally, thanks to the European justice, we will discover who is or who are the responsibles of that violation of our intimity, our fundamental rights. But if that depends on the Spanish government, I must be honest, that there's no possibility to clarify nothing.
We are unfortunately slowly running out of time, but as we've started late, is it okay if I allow 10 more minutes? And also if this is okay for you? Okay. Now, one question is coming from Kosovo. Yeah. Sebastian Pervasa, if I hope I spell it correctly, pronounce it correctly. I'm an international student here at MCI from Albania. How similar would you say the situation in Catalonia is to Kosovo? Should there be foreign military aid to the Catalans if the Spanish police resumed their violence?
But we are not the same in the same case of Kosovo. And I must say we back Kosovo and his fight to be member of the European family and to his process to democracy. Despite Spain is not recognizing Kosovo as an independent state. Look at the crisis situation. The former foreign affairs minister in Spain that has explicitly say Spain will not recognize never Kosovo is the current High Commissioner of the European Union, who is dealing with Kosovo. So it's such a strange situation. Well, one said this, it's not a comparable situation. We are living in a democracy. It's not perfect. Spain is not a perfect democracy, but it's a democracy, obviously. And there is no, until now, military threat against Catalonia. And fortunately, the majority of the Catalan people are against violence. But the decision that allows Kosovo to declare unilaterally the independence, I think was in 2010, is a referent for us. Because that sentence, that rule, says there is no one principle in international law that ban the possibility of unilateral declaration of independence. So in that point, probably Kosovo could be, in this regard, a referent. But we prefer look to the Montenegro case, which is also inspiring for us. Because in that situation, in that case, the Venice Commission suggests some conditions in order to allow a referendum. And that was a peaceful process. And finally, well, they agree in the conditions and they become independent. And they voted for it. And that was accepted for the international community. And that is one of our reference.
I see again a hand already with a mic in the air.
Hello, my name is Daniel Ferry. I'm also a student at the MCI. On the website of the European Parliament, I saw that you are a member of the Committee of the Inquiry to investigate the use of Pegasus and other equivalent surveillance spyware. And you also mentioned before that Pegasus was used against the Catalan administration to undermine its privacy and the secrecy of communication. What role do you think Pegasus plays now, especially that freedom and democracy is under threat in Europe by Russian aggression in Ukraine, and could it be used to defend our core values against the Kremlin?
May I ask you which studies you were in?
Sorry?
May I ask you which studies you are in?
Business and management.
Okay.
Yeah, there is a clear threat on the European democracy come from the authoritarian regimes. That is clear. We are always threatened by the bloc that are not democracies, and we must to act in a clear way, not only against that threat, but also to prevent a behavior similar to that. So our democracies cannot use the same tools as Russia, China, Turkey, or other authoritarian regimes. We must to ensure our society that our dissidents, our journalists, our fighters for the rights of minorities or NGOs are not a spy, and not threatened by such a software that allows governments to procure intimity and to put this data on the servers not controlled by the public servants, but companies, private companies. And that is a big, big threat for our democracy. We are ready to fight against the interest from big powers to try to affect or create conditions against Europe. But we must also be to strengthen our commitment to prevent that kind of attitudes, that kind of behavior come from our governments. Who controls them? Who ensures that now we are not spied? Well, it is quite difficult because that act is extreme, but why when we meet privately, who ensures we are not spied? Because I was spied when I prepared my defense against the Spanish state in the case when I was arrested in Germany, or when I prepare my defense in the case of my immunity in European Parliament. Why I have no right of defense? So we must be very clear to ban that kind of attitudes and to denounce, to persecute, and to condemn the responsible of that crime. We must to prove for the rest of the whole, Europe is different. Europe is not acting as Russia or Turkey or China. Europe is a safe place for freedoms, for democracy, for fundamental rights. It doesn't matter if you are part of the big groups or you are a minority. Europe must be the most powerful region in the world defending fundamental rights. And that is incompatible with the use of Pegasus. Because Pegasus is not an ordinary tool that allows a judge to know what kind of conversation you have. No. Pegasus enter in your life, in your bed, with your doctors, in your spare time, with your friends, with no limits, with no control. So be careful, all of us must be careful, allowing or, well, accepting the possibility that a government can control a part of our lives. This is a serious, probably the most serious threat against European values.
I think we really need to come to an end. Perhaps there is one last question which I have kept until the very end, which comes from Mr. Stefan Platzer. He's obviously an MCI student taken from his address. Now, what do you think, President? What do you think is necessary that the Spanish and the Catalan governments come together and have a constructive and honest discussion about the independence movement?
There is a word, respect. Respect for our reality, for our identity, for our democratic position. Respect. If there is respect, we can find agreements. And if there is respect, we can sit on the table, not only for dialogue, because we are dialoguing, but for negotiate and to find a compromise, which is the best end in a democracy for every political conflict. So if Spain respects the decision of the Catalan people, for example, Spain refused to recognize me as MEP. Despite I won the elections, clearly, I received more than 1 million votes. But Spain refused to accept me as MEP. So start for this point, accepting the results of the elections. The majority of the Catalan people voted in favor of independence. And, well, we are ready to sit on the table with a clear agenda of questions to discuss and to agree. But it's not, unfortunately, is not the case, and we don't see from the Spanish side a clear commitment. After more than 4 years of repression, a clear commitment. We don't know if Spain has a political project for Catalonia. We don't know. We don't know nothing. So start for respect, and the rest will be.
So thank you so much. Before I come to my official expression of gratitude, I would just give some organizational remarks. Now, once we have come to an end, there will be a little reward outside for you. So drinks and refreshments will expect you. So please take the opportunity to stay with us, and perhaps also President may have still a couple of minutes to stand together with you and express or exchange ideas. That's the one thing. The other thing is when now coming to an end, please also have a look into the future. There will be already on Monday, there will be our next distinguished guest Livetalk, in this case an online Livetalk. It will be Erbprinzessin Jeanette zu Fürstenberg, Dr. Jeanette zu Fürstenberg. She's a venture capitalist and she's an entrepreneur, multi-investor, and founded the venture capital fund La Familia in Berlin. And she will talk about entrepreneurship, the art of being a successful entrepreneur. in German. Then on Tuesday, May 12th, we will have an MCI alumna. She will allow us some insight behind the curtain into the field of quite a growth branch, growth business. And then on May 24th, I think it goes without saying, if you will, I think, see the screen afterwards, there will be the former president of the Republic of Poland, Peace Nobel Prize winner, and Lech Walesa, who will come from Gdansk to the MCI, and we will talk about Frieden, Freiheit, Demokratie, so peace, freedom and democracy, some thoughts and reflections on the future of Europe. Also, Heiner Oberauch will be with us, I think, on May 25th, and I just got the confirmation yesterday, the final confirmation. We will also be having the opportunity to host and welcome the European Commissioner on Research, Education and Innovation, Maria Gabriel. She will come from Brussels, and she is of Bulgarian nationality. So please enjoy this series. Not so many students would have this opportunity, which you can enjoy. But now, let me please express my and also the official gratitude, my personal and the official gratitude of MCI, the Entrepreneurial School. We have been enjoying a very touching and very insightful conversation this afternoon. Thank you, President Puigdemont. Thank you all for being here. Thanks to our partners. Please stay with us, stay outside. And now let me briefly express my gratitude with a little gift. It is below any compliance expectations. So it is, however, it has a strong idealistic value. It is the legendary, truly legendary, excuse me, ta-ta, Thanks for being here. Thank you for all the questions and contributions. Enjoy the afternoon and the weekend afterwards.